All right, now joining us from MSNBC, Richard Wolffe. Richard, how are you?
I'm good. I was just listening to that thinking he was just like Christine O'Donnell. He is you.
You know,
yeah, well,
do you know
in
that
our worst night, right? In our worst day, unfortunately, yes.
You know, Richard, this is Ben Mankiewicz. I haven't done the show in regular. You know, I don't do the show regularly anymore, but I'm here a lot. But I saw Richard on, I don't know, something else. You know, I don't know, Regis and Kelly or some other show, and I thought legitimately I had a moment of I miss Richard. I mean, it was like and we had that lunch together. I was like, oh, Richard Wolffe. I can't believe I don't talk to Richard Wolffe anymore. Well, anyway, so it's good to hear.
I miss you guys.
Yeah, I don't believe you, but I actually.
There hasn't been one moment where Richard Wolffe has looked at the television or
totally,
said,
yeah.
Oh, Ben Mankiewicz, I really miss Ben.
Yeah.
That's the laugh of someone agreeing with
Yeah,
them.
totally, yeah.
No. That was my Eugene Robinson.
All right. So, Richard, let's look at the results so far. First, are the Democrats doing better than we expected at least in terms of the Senate, or is that really trying to desperately find a silver lining here?
Both. Look, if your expectations were a complete tidal wave, landslide, wipeout, choose all of your metaphors and mix them up, then, well, this is better than that. On the other hand, these are bad results by any measure. They're bad in the Senate. They're terrible in the House. The interesting thing, for those of us who are into this stuff, is why some states are really bad and some states seem actually to be pretty reasonable. And there are a couple of different factors. So Virginia looks really bad, and Virginia was an important state, was not a marginal state in the Obama coalition of 2008. The states he pulled together, the kind of voters who showed up, not good results there. But then you look at places like Colorado. It's surprising, I think, to some pundits that Michael Bennett's still in this race. It hasn't been called yet, as far as I can see. Governor's Democratic. All the tidal wave predictions had Tom Tancredo sneaking in there. And then, of course, you've got another dynamic going on, which is Delaware. And while Delaware is hardly representative of the country, it does show the kind of damage that the Tea Party can inflict, not just with Christine O'Donnell, but losing Mike Castle's seat. So this is not a completely bleak picture. It's just really, really bad.
Well, I will say, Richard, in Colorado right now, there are two House seats where it looks like Luis Salazar. That's a baseball. Where it looks like Salazar's going to lose, and it looks like Betsy Markey's going to lose, and they're going to hold on maybe to Ed Perlmutter's seat there. So it's not so exciting in Colorado. To me, Florida is the biggest disaster of the day for the Democrats. Not only because of the fact that they lose the Senate seat in that fashion, they lose all these House seats, they lose Alan Grayson, a picture of the progressive part of their party. They may lose the governorship, but then they have to somehow pull it together in 2 years for the presidential race, and it just seems like the Democratic Party is in shambles.
Yes, but this is an incredibly volatile situation. I mean, you could not have predicted this 2 years ago. I would put any amount of money saying no one can make a reasonable stab at predicting how the next 2 years will go. So anyone who gets too comfortable, wherever they are right now, thinking they're building a machine or something permanent, it's just not what we're seeing. This is the third change election in a row. I would bet anything to say there's going to be a fourth. And the question is, does it take up everyone next time, including the president, or is the president get back and reclaim the mantle of change? Because I think a lot of people we see swept in this time around are not going to make it next time.
All right, Richard. Well, I want to build on that theme there because David Sirota was on the program earlier, and he mentioned something similar. Look, people are just keep looking for change. 3 elections in a row. Somebody, will you, for the love of God, give us change? And so this is politics 101 when people vote the bums out, right? I think, does that go towards a point where it's the American electorate saying, neither party's getting it, man. We think the politicians are bought, and we don't think they're actually representing us, and we're going to just keep on throwing you out until somebody gets it through their thick skull.
Well, I think there's a bit of confusion in what people are expecting and what they think has happened. The most important issue here is the economy. No question about it. Time and time again, we've all seen it in the polls. The voters are proving themselves pretty adept at figuring out what went wrong with the economy. They blame two things above all else, and that's the Bush administration and Wall Street. So they're not under any illusion about the root cause of what we're seeing. What they are confused about is this rebranded Republican Party. They figure that this rebranded Republican Party it would never go back to what it did before, even though they're frankly voting in people who were part of that old administration and party. But they think that this whole Tea Party rebranding means something, and they're going to find that it hasn't. And they're going to find that when it comes down to deficits and the rhetoric on spending, it's not enough, or taxes are off the table, or they're not prepared to work with the other side. Remember, independents are the voters that have swung this election, and independents do not like the kind of partisan politics that many of these new members of the House and Senate are promising.
Yeah.
So, they're going to be sorely disappointed by what they see, both in terms of specific policies and the approach to politics. And when it comes down to the president and the White House, what are the polls saying? What do voters say? They say they do not believe the president has a clear plan to create jobs. What's what they want to hear? They want to hear a clear plan to create jobs. Now, actually, the president has lots of plans, but he has not communicated that clearly. And obviously, the economy has not shown that much movement. And if you don't communicate and the economy doesn't move, then you're in this situation.
To follow up on what you were talking about there, Richard, is that when we talked about it earlier, this notion that as soon as the Republicans have an opportunity to govern, they don't know how not to fall off the cliff because they don't even know the cliff is there. Do you see any possibility of anything other than them even moving farther to the right, because all of these new members are more extreme than many of the extreme members who are already there?
Well, I actually think that you're going to see a lot of moderate Republicans representing purple states, Democratic districts, but they cannot move to where they want to be. They cannot express what they really feel, either for themselves or for their districts and states, because of the fear of a Tea Party challenge in the primaries. And because the other factor is they're going to be watching the Republican presidential candidates take off, and their whole interaction is going to be dominated by a primary contest where they'll try to outdo each other on
Richard,
the right. So the whole debate is going to be skewed.
Is there a moderating influence anywhere that you see in what will be the House Republican caucus, or will all of those voices be squelched, if there are any?
Well, John Boehner's clear plan is to sort of let 1,000 flowers bloom, and that's just, it doesn't work. You've actually got to have discipline in the House. So I don't know how. You read about how he's going to devolve power. It's never really worked. I think if you look, Dan Coates may be a lobbyist. Rob Portman may have been in the Bush administration, but generally these are not hard, ideological, staunch conservatives. I still think it's going to be very hard for them to get out ahead of where they may fear the center of gravity is in their party, even though they've got 6 years ahead of them.
We were talking about how very different it is for, the Republican Party is so fractured as they went into this election. They won, but they fractured themselves in certain places. And when they have to legislate, it's very difficult to legislate in a fractured way. Also, it's very difficult to then run in a presidential race when you have a fractured party. So from this day, this could be their very best day today, where things obviously are going their way. It's a tremendous night for the Republican Party. Where do you see the fracturing in that party start to really hurt them? Like, at what point?
Well, look, if you're a Republican, you'd say, this is a great way to be fractured, and you win like this. The truth is, though, and this is something you hear out of Obama's senior advisors, this is the best possible environment they can ever dream for. A terrible economy, single-party control, on the other side, and they don't have to offer up much, they just have to oppose. My guess is that moving forward, they'll carry on in opposition campaign mode. And you could do that for 6 months. You might be able to do it for a year, but for 2 years, it's going to be hard. And there's going to be some really tough decisions that they're going to face immediately on extending the Bush tax cuts, on the recommendations of the Deficit Commission. And so just opposing the Obama administration is not going to be enough. But I suspect that's going to be their default mode because that's the only thing that really binds them together.
Well, I have a lot to say about a lot of that. First of all, it partly depends on how the media portrays it, honestly. So I think that Bush tax cuts for the rich, I think it's could be disastrous for them politically, but my guess is that the Washington media will generally applaud and say, you know, oh, the Republicans won, it's their right, and God bless them. My guess is Democrats will bow their heads and will go along, and then everybody will agree that's just the right thing to do. So I don't think they'll pay any political price for that because the Democrats won't take advantage and the media won't harp on it. So I don't see that as...
Well, I think the White House is determined to get some advantage on this one because, look, you cannot have a reasonable debate about the deficit, which is the next beat of this thing. It's not just tax cuts on its own. You cannot talk about the deficit without talking about how tax cuts will affect the deficit. So I don't think it's in President Obama's genetic makeup to just say, okay, well, we'll do some compromise now and let's ignore all the impact it's going to have on the deficit. You may end up with a compromise where they kick it down the road for a year, and then you have an even more explosive debate in the middle of the Republican presidential contest. But
I don't think it's in President Obama's. I don't think it's in President Obama's genetic makeup to actually fight. I mean, you think he's going to say, hell no tax cuts for the rich? I think he'll give him in a year at least. He'll probably give him 2 years so they kick it so far down the road that the next president can decide. I'd be really surprised if they didn't.
You don't think it's in his genetic makeup to fight? What was he doing for 21 months campaigning for president then? He could have rolled over and played dead a long time before this. I think he's a very competitive guy. He wants to win, and he wants to win this one and win re-election. I mean, you don't hang in on health care the way he did, take the hit he did, if you don't want to fight.
Look, you know, a lot of people...
You don't fight the Clintons the way, I mean, that was a pretty formidable fight he put up against Hillary and Bill Clinton.
No, you're right. I should clarify, because he's been very tough on some Democrats. When Byron Dorgan said we should import drugs from outside the country, he cracked his skull, and he made sure that he protected the drug companies. I'm sorry, I mean, he doesn't fight when it's against Republicans and when it's against corporate interests. That he doesn't have in his genetic makeup. I mean, you show me any time he's fought a Republican. But back when he was a senator against Bush, all he ever did was bow his head.
You don't think he took on the insurance companies in the whole healthcare?
No, I do not. No, I do not in the least bit. No. That is a clear no. Okay. No, so look, you know, Richard, we can find out, and I love this conversation, don't get me wrong, okay? And we'll find out because we'll see. Like tax cuts is a great example, and as I always say, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right. But if he doesn't do at least a 1-year compromise where they extend the tax cuts, I would be shocked. If he doesn't do a 2-year compromise, I'd be surprised. Are you saying he's not going to do a compromise on either one of those, and that he's going to fight and say no, we got to do tax cuts, no tax cuts for the top 2%?
That is his current position, and he's argued that pretty forcefully. He said it does not make sense to borrow $700 billion from the Chinese to give it to billionaires and millionaires in this country.
That is exactly right.
He's got to climb down from that position, which isn't going to be easy for him because actually it's a sensible position. Now, could he say in a tough economy, we'll string it out for a year and revisit it? But doing it for 2 years, this economy is going to be it's already in recovery, okay? I know people don't like to talk about that. You talk about how the media distorts things. The recession is over, okay? It's a slow growth economy. It's a slow recovery, and it's a high unemployment recovery, which is terrible. But, you know, given the trend of where everyone thinks this economy is going, to extend it for 2 years will just blow a hole in the deficit, and it's not necessary.
All right, I have much more on that, but Ben's going to jump in here.
Well, just because I don't want you guys to fight.
No, it's a disagreement, but there's no harm in that. I love that. We've had Richard on the show only 1 billion times. There's no harm in,
You're showing.
In fact,
already.
You're showing Richard how to
I thought
fight.
it was a gazillion.
You're showing Richard what fighting really means.
No, it's not. I don't even view it as a fight. Yes.
Do you hear anything, Richard, about if the Senate ends 51-49 or even 52-48? And by the way, a dead tie now between Joe Sestak and Pat Toomey. And,
which is incredible, by the way.
It's
incredible.
It's incredible, but the Sestak's lead with 75% in has evaporated, and we've counted already many of his. Although he's done favorably in some Philly suburbs that haven't been counted yet. But so anyway, it's just something to watch.
And Mark Kirk now up incrementally in Illinois,
and Giannoulias's lead has evaporated as well. But if the Senate is, say, 51-49, 52-48, especially 51-49, do you hear anything about the trying to recruit Joe Lieberman and Ben Nelson?
About the Republicans trying to recruit?
Yeah,
no, I have not.
Yeah,
I have not heard about that. I mean, these are two senators who have who prided themselves on their independence, who have formed their peculiar coalitions. They'd have to be sure that this was a permanent shift in politics, because clearly they're not beyond, doing what other politicians have done and just flip parties just for the sake of it. But they'd have to be a lot more confident about the way politics is going in this country than just about anyone else out there. But I have not heard about the backroom talks. When you think back to Jim Jeffords, this kind of stuff, if it works, is done really secretly. As soon as it gets out, it's kind of blown to pieces.
All right. Richard, I want to go back to something you said in the beginning of the discussion. You talked about how one of the things that the country does not like, obviously, is Wall Street, right? And this seems blaringly obvious to all of us, right? How come it wasn't that obvious to the Democratic Party? We had Congressman Tim Ryan on the program a little while ago, earlier tonight, and he said in Ohio himself, Governor Strickland, et cetera, ran very hard on that, and it worked pretty well for them. And Strickland is doing better than expected. We'll see how that turns out. But I didn't get that overall sense from the Democratic Party at all, that they didn't seem to pick an obvious target, Wall Street. Why do you think? I
agree. I agree. I don't think. I think. Look, I think part of this problem here is that they just assumed people would give them some credit for the reforms they put through, and frankly, they didn't really say what they've been doing for the last couple of years. Whereas the Republicans were very effective at repeating their mantra that nothing had happened and nothing had changed and unemployment was still high. And you'd easily have got the impression that nothing was done on the economy whatsoever, whether it was in terms of Wall Street or recovery spending or anything else. I think the Democratic messaging, the storytelling out of this election was just woeful. There was no story to tell about what they had done in power, and if you cannot explain what you've done and your opponents are doing a really good job of caricaturing what you've done and caricaturing what they have done previously, well, you're going to lose. And they just didn't have a good story to tell in a difficult scenario.
Well, that goes to another point we were discussing earlier. I mean, look, doesn't it make sense to make your case throughout? I feel like they got started 2 months before the election. Like, oh, right, the Republicans are our opponents. Right, we should make our case and say that they're wrong and we're right. When I think the Republicans for 2 years knew exactly what the game was, and they've been making their case for 2 straight years. Wasn't that a tactical mistake by the Democrats and by the president?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I don't think it was just tactical. I actually think it was a kind of strategic thing. They thought, we do big stuff in the legislation and people will just get that. Well, they don't. They don't know what laws are passed. The credit card bills look a bit different because, the law says they've got to present information differently. That doesn't mean anything. You actually have to go out and say what you've done. And the real model for this, and you are not going to like this comparison, but Bush in 2004 was faced with a really difficult scenario. The Iraq War had spun out of control. There were no weapons of mass destruction. There was a raging civil war. The economy was stagnating. And what did he do? He had a really simple message, and he just beat it over and over again. Now, of course, it also involved trashing the other side, which let's face it, Democrats have been very happy to do this time. But he also said, I'm going to keep you safe. And I don't think that the Democrats have boiled down what they stand for, what they have done in any similar fashion. They have not said, we're out there saving teachers' jobs. They have not said, we're the reformers in this situation. And there's been no consistency. There's been no follow-through, and there's no thread that ties it all together. That's been a major failing.
All right, I have one last question for you along those lines, but before we do that, Ben, you have an update, unfortunately, in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Russ Feingold has been defeated, according to NBC. Fourth pickup for Republicans in this cycle, and it's just a sad frickin' day for liberals, for progressives, should be for Americans, but I suspect they're okay with it.
Well, the Republicans are, yeah. No, that's a disaster. That's in my opinion, the best senator we had, and we no longer have him. So enjoy Ron Johnson. My sense is you won't. Okay, but now finally, Richard, back to the question at hand. The question I've been asking everybody throughout the night, because I think it's the most important question. What happens next? And you know the president very well. You know, he's got to make a decision here. Is he going to fight the Republicans? Is he going to state his case for the next 2 years? Or is he going to continue to try to, quote unquote, reach out to them, work in a bipartisan fashion, when John Boehner just said bipartisanship is done and that he won't be doing any of that? Is the president going to keep making that same mistake for the next 2 years? Does he recognize it as a mistake, or does he think, no, we'll just give it time?
Oh, look, they're not naive about it at this point. You know, who do you reach out to? What kind of Republicans do you reach out to? The people have tried to use the template, it's triangulation. This is much more complex than that. You've got to have a multi-dimensional kind of image here, because there are so many different parts of that party and centers of gravity. Question number one is, what legislation do you really need to get through? And the answer is, there isn't going to be much. There's going to be some really basic stuff like budget. And beyond that, most of the president's activity has got to be in regulatory power. But really what matters here, what you're asking, is about how does he play the politics. And I think his position on the politics is not let's all hold hands, or there'll be plenty of contrite statements and meetings and nice photo ops. But what really matters here is how he calls out the gimmicks, the political games, and how he presents himself as what I think he'll try and do, is the only grown-up in the room.
But that sounds bad to me. That last part sounds bad to me. Because if you're the grown-up, that means you're above it. That means you don't fight. You don't get in the ring. Grown-ups don't get in the ring, but we need them to get in the ring.
Well, what if they're fighting amongst themselves? What if they are so painfully, obviously failing to live up their promises that he just has to point them out? You know, you want to deal with a deficit, but you take everything to do with taxes off the table. That's not reasonable. That's not actually rational or mature.
Well, if the president doesn't use the bully pulpit to make that case, by the end of the day, next thing you know, you're going to wake up 6 months later and the entire Washington media establishment is going to tell us it's perfectly reasonable.
I think you're going to find this president doing what almost every other politician in Washington will be doing, which is running for president again. And as I said, he's a competitive guy. He'll want to engage.
All right.
And also the key there is, when you talk about what Richard talked about, you can't take taxes off the table when you're talking about deficit reduction. We can't even say it like that. You got to talk about corporate taxes for Wall Street fat cats, like literally every single time.
It has to be, but that's what that's.
And he lost all their campaign contributions anyway.
That's consistent with the campaign starting tomorrow. I mean, that's how he is going to be a president, and that's how his party is going to try and be the party of the president. And that's what when I was asking Richard before about the way that the Republicans will fracture. That goes contrary to the way they need to find a candidate for president. So that does help the Democrats and helps the president.
All right, Richard Wolffe from MSNBC. Thank you so much for joining us. Always fun, and we
Thanks
appreciate
from MSNBC. Thank you. Anytime.
All right, take care, Richard.